What's up, y'all? This is DJ Kenny Parker, DJ and producer for Boogie Productions / KRS-One, and today I'm back with another video. Now, today's video is part of my series that I call Epic Fails, when hip-hop goes wrong. In my comment section, I've been getting a lot of requests for this topic, so today we're going to take it over to the West Coast. Now, as most of you who watch this channel may know, I'm part of the classic rap group Boogie Productions, based out of New York City. But over the years, we've traveled to the West Coast many times, and I've got to meet a whole bunch of West Coast artists and kick it with a few of them. Before I start the story, I want to give a shout out to a few of the West Coast artists that I've had the chance to personally sit down and talk to. First, I want to shout out my brothers from Cypress Hill. Shout out to the homie Be Real, shout out to super producer Muggs, and shout out to my man Sen Dog, who one time I actually bumped into in Times Square on 42nd Street in Manhattan, and we ended up going to a club and hanging out for the night. It was a great time. This is back in the mid-90s. Shout out Sen Dog. I want to shout out the West Coast legend, King T. I ran into him in a club one time in New Jersey, and we ended up kicking it for about half an hour. So shout out to King T. My good friend DJ Premier introduced me to West Coast legend WC of WC and the Mad Circle, and a person who's toured with Ice Cube for decades. I had a chance to sit down with WC and kick it about the East Coast and West Coast, the similarities and contrasts. He's a super cool dude. Shout out to my man WC. And finally, I want to shout out the Souls of Mischief and the whole Hieroglyphics crew. I did a video a few months back on the Souls of Mischief and my relationship with the Souls of Mischief. You can find it right here on my channel. Lastly, before I get into the stories, I want to say that a couple of these stories are not exactly epic fails. I just found them to be extremely funny, and I hope you guys do too. Okay, let's get into the stories. My first story centers around, if you guys have been watching my channel, my favorite year in hip hop, 1990, when I first started with BDP. My very first tour with BDP, we went out to the West Coast for a series of shows. On one of our days off, we went to a club in LA, I do believe it was the Palladium, to see our main man, Biz Markie, perform. Also on the bill was Michelle Lay, if I recall, and a group called the Digital Underground. They had just released their debut album, and their single, Humpty Dance, had exploded. Backstage, we got to meet the whole crew for the first time. Shout out to my man Money B. Money B, what's up? Shout out to DJ Fuse, and shout out to the legendary Shock G. The whole crew was super cool. As a matter of fact, in the middle of their show, they had this little skit where they brought out these cartoon faces of various rappers, and then they would throw on a song and ask the crowd to guess which rapper it was. Sure enough, they had a real funny picture of KRS-One with this big nose, and they threw on I'm Still Number One, and the whole crowd was going, KRS-One, KRS-One, and we were all standing right there, including KRS-One. It was mad funny. So after the show, we kicked it with them, and it was all good. Now during the show, I noticed that Shock G was rapping, Money B was rapping, and they were doing their songs, but sometime during the middle of their set, Shock G kind of disappeared. He disappeared behind this curtain, and I didn't see him anymore. And all of a sudden, Humpty Hump came out, and they started doing Do What You Like. And then they did Humpty Dance, and the whole place went crazy. And then a little while later, Shock G reappeared. So I'm saying to myself, watching the show, watching everything, I'm like, Shock G has got to be Humpty Hump. What a great character he developed. Fast forward to 1 week later, and we were back in New York City, and I was at a club called Powerhouse at a place called The Building. A lot of you guys from New York City in the early 90s might know what I'm talking about. So I'm in the club chilling, the club is packed, and who walks in? Humpty Hump, with the whole nose, the glasses, the cape, everything. So I see Humpty Hump, and he's walking right in front of me. So I'm like, oh, let me say what's up to him. We was just chilling with him a week earlier. So I walk up to Humpty Hump and I go, yo, what's up, man? What's good? And he looks at me and he goes, have we met? And I'm like, yo, I'm Kenny Parker. I'm with BDP. I'm KRS-One's brother. We met last week. He looks at me and he goes, oh yeah, I think Shock G mentioned you. So now I'm looking at this guy like, oh, and I'm looking at him and I'm like, I can see that's Shock G. That's Shock G. But he was so in character, y'all, that he was like, yo, I'm Humpty Hump. I've never met you before, but Shock G mentioned you, and it's nice to meet you. And he shook my hand. And I was like, oh, okay, this is what we doing. Nice to meet you, Humpty Hump. I'm gonna say right now, I probably should have known the rules. I never should have approached Humpty Hump talking about Shock G. And for that, I'm gonna say, shout out to Money B, shout out to DJ Fuse, shout out to the whole Digital Underground family, and rest in peace to my dude who I've had a chance to kick it with a few times after that, the legendary, super talented Shock G, aka Humpty Hump. Story number 2. Now this story I do believe took place in, I think, 1995. BDP and KRS-One had a show on the West Coast. I do believe it was LA in this spot. So we're doing the show. The show was rocking as usual. And in the middle of the show, all of a sudden, this mosh pit breaks out. So now I'm up on the DJ booth. Everybody's in front of me and I can see the mosh pit. They were going crazy. As a matter of fact, this mosh pit got to be so rough. It looked like dudes were literally throwing punches. It looked like a brawl, but it was actually a mosh pit. So we keep rocking. We're watching the mosh pit. And Chris is rhyming. And in the middle of his rhyming, he goes, wait a minute. That looks like Ice-T. And he says this on the mic. In the middle of the mosh pit was legendary OG, iconic West Coast MC, Ice-T. Yo, he was in the middle of this mosh pit throwing elbows, blows. He was going super hard. We're on stage. We couldn't believe this is Ice-T. Not only the Ice-T that we had known for years, not only the OG, but this is Ice-T who is now on television in the mosh pit thumping. After the show, everything was over. People had left. We were outside in the parking lot about to get into our vehicles to go back to the hotel. We see this one figure coming across the parking lot. It was Ice-T. He looked like he had been in an all-out fight. You know how light-skinned Ice-T is. His face was red. His hair was all over the place. His shirt was completely ripped and tattered. He walks up to us. We like, yo, Ice, are you all right? He's like, hi, like, yeah, I'm good. So we're like, yo, we kick it with him for a little while. Everything's all good. So then he was like, all right, I'm about to get out of here and go back home. I live up in the hills. So we watching him. We're just following him, watching him. He walks over to a brand new Rolls Royce. Keep in mind, he's ripped up, clothes all tore up, hair all tore up, but he jumps into the Rolls Royce. starts it up, and he pulls up to us. He's like, yo, peace, I'm out. And he drove off, and his license plate said, "Pimpin' ain't easy" on the back. Yo, we fell out. It was so dope. Like, yo, this dude just finished getting tore up in a mosh pit, throwing blows, getting blows. He's a big star, big TV star. His clothes are ripped, but he's still Ice-T at the end of the day. Jumped into a Rolls Royce with "Pimpin' Ain't Easy" on the license plates. Shout out to Ice-T. That was a real boss move. Shout out to Africa Islam, down with Ice-T. Shout out to the whole syndicate. And shout out to the brothers, Hank G and Evil E. Okay, y'all, this is the last story. Story number 3. Once again, it takes place in my favorite year, 1990, in one of my early tours with BDP. At this time, BDP was on a national tour going from east to west with another rapper called Young MC. We get to the venue in LA and we're doing sound check. I'm setting up my equipment, everything's cool. All of a sudden, in walks about 30 dudes, and each one of them was gigantic. They were so big, and it was so many of them, they really took up the whole space when they came in, and everybody was looking at them like, who's this? All of a sudden, the last dude came in, and he was the biggest out of all of them. He looked like a sumo wrestler. Turns out, it was a group called the Boo-Yaa tribe. And trust me when I tell you guys, they were very intimidating. About 5 of them left this pack of 30 and started coming in my direction, looking very serious. I'm like, oh man, what's going on? They come up to the stage, they come right up to me. And in the calmest voice, one of them says, "Hey man, we forgot our turntables. Do you mind if we borrow your turntables for the show tonight? We're performing." I was like, what am I gonna say at this moment? I was like, first of all, they were super cool and diffused the whole situation. And I was like, I don't have a problem with you guys using the turntables. Just make sure you bring them back and have them set up when it's time for us to go on. They were like, sure, man. Thank you so much. They were so cool. Then at the same time, I'm still looking at these dudes like, yo, what if they had walked up and been like, yo, like Debo, yo, homie, what you got on these turntables? Yo, there was so many of them, y'all, and they were so big, that could have been an... Anyway, y'all, shout out to the Boo-Yaa tribe. They were super cool, and rest in peace to a few of the members of the Boo-Yaa tribe who have since passed away. And shout out to everybody from the West Coast who's watching this video right now. I hope to see you guys in the comments section below. Anyway, y'all, that's my story for today. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you do, please give me a thumbs up, a like, and subscribe, and I'll catch you guys on the next one. Peace.